Today's guest is redefining what it means to be a surgeon and innovator. Associate Professor Matthew Reed is a leading upper gastrointestinal surgeon at St. Vincent's and Epworth Hospitals and Chief Medical Information Officer at St. Vincent's, Melbourne. He's pioneered work in AI-driven surgery, augmented reality training, and leads national research to cut healthcare-associated infections through the Daylight Foundation, a cause saving thousands of lives each year. From global research to training surgeons in Kenya, Matthew's impact reaches far beyond the operating room. Please welcome Associate Professor Matthew Reed, surgeon, innovator, and changemaker. Enjoy the podcast.
Associate Professor Matthew Reed, welcome to Everyday Heroes podcast by Kofkin Bond. Great to have you. I think we've spent a lot of time together this week.
Yeah, it's been a great week. Wednesday morning breakfast, and then
Wednesday morning breakfast, I was salivating because I just had breakfast before I actually met you as well. Met up with you, but I will be probably going there on Saturday, I reckon.
Yeah, anchovies on toast.
Oh, they looked great. There were anchovies and eggs, and that mayonnaise looked luscious as well. So it's so I will definitely be going back there on Saturday morning if I can park my car in one of those damn small car parks. They're a bit small, but welcome to our podcast. Great to have you here. Now, you are a surgeon of some note, to put it mildly, both in Australia and internationally, but we're going to touch on a whole range of other things that you do as well. So, I've got notes here. Says, you're a surgeon, academic, innovator, philanthropist, husband, father of three. Your three kids love swimming, so early mornings for you and your wife.
More so my wife. I chip in maybe once a week.
Yeah, so it's but with everything that you actually do, to put it bluntly, you obviously don't sleep.
I get a few hours a night. Try and get at least 5 or 6, but it can be quite varied week to week, day to day, especially if you're on call.
Yeah,
I guess the field I'm in, which is upper gastrointestinal surgery, so that focuses on the esophagus and the stomach, and if there's an emergency, it sort of can't wait usually. So yeah, when you're on call for a whole week block. So.
Well, I was actually saying to Bella, because we're actually at your Hope Foundation breakfast this morning. Crowd you had there, by the way, and great. It was a great morning.
I thought it was fantastic. A really engaging crowd.
And then you said to me, "Sorry, Tony, I just have to pop into St. Vincent's. I have to see a patient before I come up here." So, I said, and I did say, if you have to cancel, you have to cancel. If you have to get new scrubs. So but anyway, thank you for coming today. But when you reflect on the career and journey, what's actually consistently driven you to go beyond just clinical practice, challenge the status quo in healthcare, which is something that you are really well known for? You don't just go there, do the surgery and walk away. You really do challenge the status quo.
Yeah, well, I guess I try to, and it's probably more in recent years that's evolved. I guess as a junior doctor, you don't set out to do that. You just sort of follow, I guess, standard practices and I guess what your mentors do and everything. But I mean,
just do what you're trained to do, basically?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And early on, my main goal was to become a surgeon. That was my passion. And it was a long journey. I think from starting uni to becoming fully qualified surgeon for me was 21 years.
And actually, when you first went to uni, you actually weren't studying medicine, were you? Yes.
I got a third round offer. So I got accepted into engineering law first up. And, having wanted to do med basically since I was a 10-year-old, I thought, I was initially disappointed, but it didn't last long. So then I thought, I was really excited about being an engineer and thought, I liked physics and everything. And I thought I could do that. But managed to get a third round offer into medicine. And they actually called me up and on the phone, it was pre-email and internet days. And they said, we've got an offer for you in the Faculty of Medicine. Do you want to take it? And as a sort of 17-year-old, I said, oh, no, it's all right. I've got into, engineering law now. And they said, are you sure? Do you want to think about it? And then I said, all right, I'll think about it overnight. And I told my parents and they said, what? You said what? So anyway, the next day I called up and I said, I'll take that offer. But I called the wrong university because I was in such a, in the spur of the moment, I forgot to take down what university it called me to offer the position. I had to ring around all the medical schools to apply for.
Did you offer me a position last? No, it wasn't us.
It was a bit embarrassing, but I ended up, I went straight from high school to medicine. So, which is it's a different path now. It's really hard to now go from high school to med. Usually there's sort of an undergraduate degree now, the required.
Yeah. No, so it's
going back to the question though, initially my goal was just to become a doctor, and then I want to be a surgeon. And it's not until you're, I guess, well entrenched into the system and you see the problems, and then you want to start to make changes. When you're junior, you're not really aware of the bigger picture, I guess.
Yeah, but that might only be 5 to 10% of surgeons. A lot of them are just happy in doing what they do, long hours, as I know, and then just sort of going home.
Yeah,
You looked at things and said that's not efficient.
correct. And I guess it's what motivates you and what you get enjoyment and satisfaction out of as well. I couldn't just, as much as I like surgery and operating, I couldn't operate all day doing the same operations. It becomes a bit like a production line. I like the variation, the different roles and
Yeah,
challenges, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
yeah. So I actually heard. I was out for dinner last night, and somebody spoke about surgeons, and they said, well, at the end of the day, it's being a surgeon seems to be like, doing ballet, but you're doing Swan Lake, and you've been doing that for 30 years. The
Yeah,
same show two times a day
yeah,
for 30 years, where it actually can just be a bit robotic. Whereas we just look at you guys and say, guys and girls, and say, wow,
yeah.
what you do is just. Whereas for you, doing, you're doing it, you've done it, year in, year out, but
Mm.
you tend to, from what I understand about you as well, you tend to go and say, I don't know if that one's right, that one, you actually do still challenge that status quo.
Yeah, and I think, it's an important sort of trait, I guess, to constantly assess and evaluate what you're doing and what your outcomes are. But
Were
yeah,
you a kid,
I'm
were
always,
you a kid who continually asked your parents and teachers heaps of questions, and
I,
where you, even if you weren't satisfied with the answers, just kept going at it?
I
Or
guess I probably had an
I
inquisitive
met your mum
mind.
today, I should have actually
Oh
asked
yeah,
her.
yeah, you should have asked her. Probably
Yeah.
tell you a lot more. But I guess I was always inquisitive and like that problem solving sort of aspect of things.
Hmm.
But yeah, I guess when you see something that's not working or inefficient, for instance, yeah, the natural instinct is to think about how you can sort of go about making change.
Yeah.
And I guess as a surgeon, you know, there's a lot of hours in a day that you spend just thinking. So, like not every surgery is really, I guess, complex. Like you said, a lot of it is pretty standardized, for instance. So
For you.
yeah, well,
Yes,
there's a
yeah.
lot of surgeries that are quite standardized. There's obviously it varies case to case, and some cases are a lot more complex, and you really got to focus. But there is a lot of downtime during the day, and you do get to think about solutions to things, and
Yeah.
yeah. So
But well, on that note, though, you've done cancer biology research, surgery, obviously AI innovation, and global health.
yeah,
So you do obviously think outside the scope of just what your specialty is.
yeah, and I guess that's not something I planned from the outset. It's all just naturally evolved. So when I was doing surgical training, it was purely just focused on learning how to become a surgeon. And that requires probably tens of thousands of hours and thousands of operations. And then, it really is, it's a long learning curve and it can be quite a steep learning curve as well. So you
Yeah.
really need, it's not like you can't really be distracted at the start. You need to really focus on getting those hours and that experience. And everyone learns at different rates. But I guess after that, or towards the end of my training, then I developed this interest in research. First, it was part of the training program. You had to do some research.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do a little project that had no impact. I wanted to do something bigger. And I went out and I actually enrolled in a PhD and did that through Peter McCallum. And that was 4 years in a lab. So
Okay.
I spent, 10 years in the hospital, and then I was back 4 years in a lab doing very basic science type research. And that was on esophageal cancer, so
Yeah.
a cancer of the food pipe, and which is one of those really aggressive cancers. And treatment hasn't really changed over the last 3 or 4 decades. So, it, you know, and as a clinician, you started to see that. And as a junior doctor, we're doing these massive operations on patients. The outcome wasn't great, and that's where you start thinking, "Oh, what can we do better?" And that's the initial impetus to get me into research.
Yeah.
And then ended up, sorry, up to camera, ended up, yeah, doing research for 4 years in a lab, and probably took me another 3 years to write my thesis. That was, I guess, my entry point into research. That opened so many doors for me, sort of internationally with collaborators, colleagues, and so that was my first sort of, I guess, journey away from pure clinical practice,
Yeah.
doing that research sort of component. And I guess during that, I ended up developing these models where we could grow human tissue in a lab and, investigate biology, test new treatments. So that's in a small little field that's had a big impact in that space. So, at the time I was really proud of those sort of achievements.
So this is something that Professor Fiona Woods gone on did too, wasn't it? With the
Correct. Very similar. Like Fiona did that in the field of skin biology and regenerative medicine, and I was doing the same in the esophagus.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at it under the microscope, they're very similar tissues actually.
Okay.
There's a lot of crossover there. I guess different applications. Fiona's growing skins for clinical application.
Well, she became very famous, obviously, after the was it the Bali bombings?
Yeah, Bali bombings.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of the victims ended up in Perth, and even at the time I was a medical student, and at the Alfred Hospital we actually got some of those burns victims at the Alfred. So I remember being in theatre, and you're doing sort of 4 or 5 hour operations where they're just debriding, like cleaning all these burns and putting the skin grafts on. And as a medical student, I was just there holding a leg for like 2 or 3 hours, and that's it's quite heavy work. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's you are a fit man though.
Not an elite athlete. Like,
keep telling you, past glories. So the stories just get better as I age. That's what I always say. But it's
I'm not a sporting person. I could have been at best.
I don't know. Wayne Carey called you an effing smartass when it come to kicking a footy. So it's so I did say you can swear on this podcast. I know you don't, but it's no. So, but let's talk about some of your philanthropic work. So, silent epidemic, healthcare associated infections. Now, before I go on to this question, I do remember the name eludes me, but it's when the amount of women that were, and this is a long time ago, obviously, probably 150 years ago, but the amount of women who were dying after giving birth, and there was studies done, and somebody just turned around and told the doctors, why don't you just wash your hands prior? And that actually, that was my sort of first understanding when we were talking the other morning at breakfast of,
there's a lot of stories
infection
like that.
control, or, was just born out of just wash your hands, so, to stop the infection and things like that. So a lot of women were probably today would have been dying absolutely needlessly. In today, my grandmother died giving birth to my mother. And that was because her afterbirth wasn't cleared properly, and she ended up in infection, and dying as a result. So my mum, my mum lost her mum when she was 6 days old as a result of infection. Now, she was born in a barn in London, and there's no phones, and there's no ambulances coming, and no hospital, obviously, things like that. So when you're in a barn, which wasn't clean either, so she basically died of an infection. So this is something that's very close to my heart, to put it bluntly, when we were talking about the other day.
And if you look at the stats, it should be close to a lot of people.
Affecting 1 in 10 patients, costing $5 billion annually, and claiming over 7,500 lives each year in Australia alone.
Which is like 8 times more than the road toll.
Well, it's not just that. It's it's more than breast cancer, prostate cancer, which are two of the most. I know from trauma insurance claims with us, they're two most common cancer claims: breast cancer and prostate cancer, and the road toll. But it's something that people don't hear of.
Exactly. There's no real press around it, and it's simple interventions that can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
But that's what we're trying to shine the light on. Hence the Daylight Foundation.
Yeah.
And Angus, who's the CEO and founder, has done some great work in sort of raising awareness and sort of trying to affect policy change and get in front of the politicians. But at the heart of it, you need money to do a lot of these initiatives, to kick them off. And there's very little funding.
This $5 billion a year, I'm assuming this is just in Australia.
That's just Australian
numbers. Now, hospitals are funded by state government.
It's a complex, some federal, some state.
Okay, yeah, but you had I've forgotten his name, Mr. Evans. This morning, Evan Lucas. I was going to say Lucas Evans. Evan Lucas speaking today, and he was just talking about tax and where it's all coming from and things like that. But if this is costing $5 billion a year, realistically, it's if it's costing the hospital system, it's costing government, which means it's costing taxpayer. More importantly, it's costing 7,500 lives.
It's the lives. It's not just lives lost, but it's the impact on your quality of life. So even if you
Well, those
survive,
families as well.
and it's the families. So you could have a permanent disability, or it could be 2 years before you're back to full-time work. So it's got significant implications. So it's not just the $100,000 it might take to treat that infection.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all those downstream consequences that are really hard to measure.
That's how we met was, through one of our clients, Jason Reed.
Correct.
So it's who got an infection after his operation.
Yep.
So it's and I would have always thought hospitals, and certainly a lot cleaner than my son's bedrooms ever were, but it's but quite clean and always infection
on
control.
the surface maybe, but yeah, if you actually tested them, no, you've got a lot of resistant organisms in hospitals, and that's part of the focus of our work as well, trying to reduce the incidence of those resistant organisms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, because you are looking at, you're advocating for 200 million MRFF research mission, matched with philanthropic funding to cut HIAs and surgical site infections by more than 50%. Why is it a mission? Why isn't this something that you guys, who are the medical experts, who are bringing to governments? I mean, if the government were to fund it, I'm sure there'd be a lot of private foundations that would also look at funding this as well, especially people who have been infected by it. I have through my mother and grandmother, so from that perspective, but at different times, 1939, obviously, in a barn in Ireland, but, so it's not down in St. Vincent's. But why is it such an effort to be able to raise, one, the awareness, and then be able to get that funding, especially with the quality of people like yourselves who are backing this?
Yeah, I think even though it's a massive problem, firstly, there's that lack of awareness, but it's also getting in front of the right decision maker, the person actually pull that lever and sort of allocate the funding. It's hard to get it from government. NHMRC or MRFF funding, it's really competitive, and they have specific call outs, and a lot of the time it's not in the space of hospital or healthcare associated infections. But I think they're probably a couple of the main barriers. And then to get that significant funding is extremely rare. It's only happened a few times in the country in other diseases, but it's something that needs to happen, and that's why we're focusing on government, but also philanthropic sort of side of things. That there is a movement. There's a few of the high net worth individuals in the country that are really advocating to give a significant portion of their wealth, to these sort of causes, and that's what we're trying to leverage, that sort of, I guess, momentum, and combine that with government. Yeah.
Well, I mean, how I met Jason was introduced to him through a gent by the name of Tony Goldhart, who, but what Jason had done with Brighter Days and, raising money and awareness for Cure EB. So once again, a horrid, absolutely horrid skin disease, but I called it the disease that no one's ever heard of. But it's the effect it has on, I know Charlie Stone very well, CEO of AB Australia, and then there's Deborah Foundation as well, which we support with Brighter Days also. But it was just like, these are the type of things where you think they're, and this is something I would think, just simple things that we were taught to do, during COVID, of washing your hands properly and stuff like that. That's just simplistic. Now, I know you guys as surgeons go well beyond that, but
this is not always. And that's, if you look at the data, it's still those simple interventions can make a huge difference.
Well, I hope you never have to be my surgeon, but if I did have to go through that, I would, I would like you. You do have very soft hands, so you obviously wash them well. So it's, but I mean, based on that, so what would actually success, if this mission did receive support, what would success look like for you guys in 10 years' time?
Well, firstly, the first success is really to raise the funds, and it needs to be mission led, because, I guess if it's privately led or university led, it introduces bias, and you can funnel money to certain areas that you think are more beneficial to your goals and aims, I guess.
Yeah.
So being mission led sort of eliminates that. But firstly, raise the awareness, raise the funds, and really start some big collaborative projects, both nationally and internationally. This has got global reach. In 10 years, hopefully we're at least 5 years into some big projects and collecting a lot of data. And a lot of the project research that we're proposing, rely on accurate data, because that's something we don't do well in healthcare. Typically, historically, everything's very paper-based, and we don't collect accurate data. We don't know the true incidence of HAIs, for instance. Now that everything's shifting to more electronic medical records, it'll be a lot easier to sort of pull all that data. So, yeah, in 10 years' time, hopefully we've got a good, reliable data lake that we can actually analyze everything. And with AI, the way it's evolving, having AI analyze the data and maybe having some AI predictive tools to help identify patients at risk,
That
and
is
even some
something that
better
you're
treatment.
actually working on yourself, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sort of leading a research program at Melbourne Uni, building AI tools,
Yeah.
and even privately, I work for an AI company that's building a lot of like the scribes that the doctors are using. So if you go into your specialist or GP now, you might notice they've stopped typing or writing their notes, and at the end, AI has just been listening and does a nice succinct summary and a letter. So they're the sort of tools that I've been involved in helping to develop over the years.
Yeah. So when we chatted on Wednesday, I did notice they were in the AFR. I was reading the AFR after I
Yeah,
caught
so
up with you, and
that
they
company,
actually were.
MDs, just
Yeah, they were
received.
actually in the AFR that day.
Yeah, I got interviewed, but got cut.
Oh, there you go.
I was this close to getting the AFR.
Okay, so it's if you're going to be in the AFR, you want it to be for the right reasons.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the finance industry, or a lot of people in business in general, that were really happy when Joe Aston retired. So he never wanted a phone call from Joe. So but it looks like he's coming back now.
Yeah, but yeah, they managed to successfully get a pre-series funding, and they're doing their Series A later this year. So, I mean, these AI companies, I guess, with the multiplier, that they're massive valuations and raising huge money overseas, especially. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to raise money over in the US than seems to be anywhere else. So it's a lot of.
Well, they say that. They
cash there.
say there's a lot of money in Texas, and I went to Texas last year, pitched to 6 VC groups. Still struggled, but
Yeah,
I guess the timing's got to be just right, I think.
there is a lot of money in Texas, but all the Californian, everyone thinks of Silicon Valley, all that money's moved to Miami. So all the owners of those companies have all moved to Miami, at least anyway.
Okay.
It's there's no tax. So
Oh, there you go.
so compared to, so they've moved from Silicon Valley and the most taxed state in the US to Miami is the lowest tax rate and lowest crime rate of any major cities in the US too now. So
Wow.
not quite like my days of growing up watching Don Johnson shoot up the streets of Miami Vice. So it's a little bit different. Or Sonny Crockett, as his name was. I was a fan of Miami Vice. But let's look at, so one of the things that your proposal actually mentions is the equity impacts. Women, children, Indigenous Australians, regional communities seem to be the ones who suffer the most. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly disproportionately. And I think a lot of that comes down to, with the Indigenous population, is their equitable access to healthcare. And that is. Mm, yeah. Yeah, and the incidence of diabetes is much higher compared to the overall population. And correct. I mean, I was fortunate enough to experience that firsthand. I worked in Katherine in the Northern Territory for 4 months as a posting, and that truly was eye-opening. It is third world medicine up there.
Yeah.
And that I did that post at an early age, and that probably influenced how I thought about things as well. Yeah.
Let's go back to the
diabetes, that is directly correlating with infection risk as well.
Absolutely, it is. So it's, but when it's, for example, the cost of an apple, which has just virtually traveled the distance around the globe 8 times before it actually gets to these remote communities and is rotten, and that costs $4, or like you would just go to the local survey and get deep fried everything for $1.50. So it's, and then there's so many. It's a trying to break the cycle, as my father would always say, talk about, breaking the cycle. So it's
it can be tough to do. And the link with the women's health, there's certain categories of healthcare associated infections, and urinary tract infections are more than double in women. So
it's I was going to just say, what's to come of that?
Sorry, keep tucking the camera.
That's okay. Innovation technology. We're going to go back to AI here. So you've actually led projects, AI augmented reality in surgery, improving gallbladder operations to digesting surgical workflows. How do you actually see these technologies help in preventing simple things like, infections and improve patient safety and things like that?
Well, firstly, I mean, our main focus has been on probably training and safety. I started that AI work probably 5 years ago. I was just returning from overseas, from my training overseas, and I trained in robotics in esophageal surgery, which was quite a niche sort of field at the time. I went to the Netherlands to do that because they're probably 20 years more advanced than us in that field. And I'd been to a few conferences and was just hearing about AI and its potential. And at the same time, I was thinking, gee, how could I sort of deploy that technology, in the stuff that we're doing? And that's when I got back to Melbourne. It was just day before COVID hit, so everything was basically shut down. So part of my role at St. Vincent's, where I worked, was part clinical, part research. But we couldn't do any of the lab-based research. So that's when I thought, oh, actually, we're still operating. We're still getting lots of video data. How about we do an AI project? And we've really set ourselves up as world leaders in this space. And early on, it was all about how do we train the computer to recognize all the anatomy when we're operating? And with the view to trying to develop a tool that would help prevent us injuring what's called the bile duct. That's the tube that connects the liver to the gallbladder and the bowel. If that gets damaged, it'll take 10 years off your life. So there's 40,000 gallbladder surgeries a year. The chance of damaging that structure, that bile duct, is probably...
Is this why good gut health is so important as well?
It can be. It can. If you've got a problem with the gallbladder, it's probably better to act on it sooner, because the longer you leave it, the higher the chance of complications in surgery. But if that structure's damaged, as I said, on average, it takes 10 years off your life. And it's the most common operation that we do in general surgery in this country, 40,000 a year. And the chance of damaging that is about probably just under 0.5%. So even though it's low, the fact that we do so many means that it's still, in the high hundreds that are impacted each year.
What are some of the things that actually lead to or cause that damage?
It can be the disease state, or it's usually the surgeon operating in an area they shouldn't be. And it's called sort of confirmation bias. Like the surgeon thinks they're somewhere and they're telling themselves they are, and they're picking up on cues and misinterpreting those cues. So the odd thing is, you can be a really senior surgeon and doing that operation. A much more junior person can come in and you clearly see you're operating in the wrong spot, and they might say, "Hey, what are you doing? You should be over here," when you're actually, and then you just stop, take a step back, and think, "Oh, gee, yeah." It's almost like flying a plane.
Yeah.
If you're just flying by instruments, you might think you're doing a good job, and you're telling yourself you're at the right altitude and speed and everything. And you might have a co-pilot come in and say, "Hey, what are you doing? We're about to hit a mountain." And it's that sort of thing. Like, you can easily pick on the wrong cues and tell yourself the wrong information. But that's what we were training AI to do, as that warning tool. So as a surgeon, if with the pilot analogy, if you're going to hit a mountain, you want an alarm to sound, "Hey, before you cut that structure, why don't you shift?" So that's what we were hoping to do. And that's where the augmented part comes in. So we did lots of early work in developing the techniques to train the computers to recognize the anatomy, which is a huge body of work. That's a PhD in itself.
Yeah.
But then trying to overlap that image onto the video feed at the same time, that's what we're working on next.
Yeah.
And then it's how you deploy that. And at the moment, we're thinking, let's just do it as a retrospective training tool. So once you've done your surgery, feed it through the AI and get a score on, say, your surgical safety. How safe were you as an operator? Because we sort of alluded.
So you're looking at getting instant feedback for the work you've actually just done.
Yeah. Because one thing I've worked out that we do really poorly in surgery is training and coaching. So you've got sort of basically a 6 to 8 year period where you get really intensive training. After that, you're on your own. So if you've got a 30-year career as a surgeon, after that first period, you're on your own. And if you mentioned the analogy to ballet,
Yeah, well, in our industry, you still have to do things like, for example, CPD points and things like that.
You do CPD, but no one's there watching over you saying. So CPD might be like.
So every year I randomly get files audited to say, okay, he's still doing a good job.
Yeah.
So is the same thing happen?
True. So for us, if we have a complication or a mortality, you submit a form, it gets assessed. if you go to a conference, you get points. That's all CPD. Yeah. It'd be like if you're a golfer playing in a golf tournament, you get points. You're actively participating. You tick your CPD requirements. But golfers still have a coach. If you're Tiger Woods or Rory McIlroy, you still got someone telling you how to perfect your swing.
Yeah.
As a surgeon, you don't have that, right? So even though it's sort of an elite sort of activity, 1 millimeter off, I could take 10 years off your life. You got no one giving you that feedback. So that's where that sort of coaching and AI can really help, I think.
It's interesting you say that, because we're the same in this industry. If anything, I've got 33 years experience, and I do mentor younger advisors, being my own team here as an example, but also other advisors as well. But it is really interesting because nobody mentors me or checks over me.
Yeah, exactly. But you're probably at the level where you're the master, but no one. You don't talk to other masters to say.
But the thing is, though, you talk about that confirmation bias earlier. I might think what you just said is exactly true. I tend to agree with you, but somebody else might say, "Oh, he's making regular mistakes here, or he's doing this," because you've got that confirmation bias of everything you've done. Well, it's always worked, so it must be right. But there might be better ways of doing things that, whether it be confirmation bias, whether it be a bit of arrogance, you're not even looking at anymore.
Yeah, and there's certainly that. You get different personalities in any profession. I think it's important to have, I guess, that personality that still is quite reflective, and you're always thinking about how you can improve and looking at your results. There are some people that, you think, gee, like your outcomes aren't as good. Like, what are you doing about it? So that's a whole nother podcast in itself.
It's true, but it's interesting you raise that, because I was actually talking to Bella just before you came in, and we were talking about actually Charlie Kirk getting shot yesterday, and just the fact that he was a magnificent debater. Whether you agree with his side of his thought process or not, he was actually a really good debater. But I was making the comment that when I was at school St Bernard's, I was part of the debating team in Year 10. And one of the things we were actually taught to do is, so if I had a particular view on a subject, and actually I can tell you one, when I was in Year 10, it was the Franklin Dam over in Tasmania. And I just went with what my father was saying, and I thought the dam was a great idea. So when there was 8 of us in the debating team, and when we were all asked, and so I said I thought it was a great idea. Another guy, Paul Williams, was the same side as me, and there were others who were on the opposite side. Yeah. But what our debate coach did, who was actually also an English teacher, is I had to debate on the opposite side. So did Paul. So we had to do all of our research, which was actually against our biases. But what was interesting is my view was formed based on listening to my father. So it was just like, well, I love my dad. He's a smart man. He said it, so it must be true. And so we were actually, I suppose, through that with our English teacher, Brother Bond, it was more like we were taught to think and be flexible in our thinking, and having to do research on something we don't agree with, and then get up on stage and argue so strongly for something that you originally didn't actually agree with what was actually true. So from that perspective, in some ways, I think we were taught to actually just have a flexible mind and to think, and then I might have a particular, and even now today, I might have a particular view on a subject, and then you're an expert in that subject, and you tell me something that I wasn't aware of. Rather than digging my heels in, I have that ability to be able to say, "Oh, okay, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know that," and actually, that might start to really sway my thinking, because I respect you as an individual and an expert in that field. I see that tends to get a little bit lost nowadays as well. But if you have been doing surgeon for 33 years or in financial services for 33 years, we can have that particular view of ourselves of, well, we've done really well. I'm not going to have a young upstart tell me that I could improve this. I mean, is that something that can occur then?
Oh, definitely. Everything you've said. And I think the important thing is just to listen to advice and be flexible, adapt your thinking. But it's important to be able to challenge people as well. So
otherwise, you'd still be doing surgery the same as you did 100 years
ago. Just because
ago.
somebody says something doesn't mean it's fact. You still got to do your research and look at the evidence behind it.
Absolutely.
The thing about medicine and surgery in particular if you actually look at the evidence, there's not a lot of evidence, like hard evidence behind a lot of the things we do. A lot of it is just we do it this way because that's how we were taught. We've always done it this way.
Yeah.
So, with surgery, there's the art of it and the science.
Yep.
And you do get big personalities that say you must do it this way because, and sometimes it's hard to challenge that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, all those issues are, they're all relevant to surgery.
Now, I would like to talk about something else too. It's just something you do in your spare time. But you've established training programs in Kenya. You've held leadership roles internationally. How do you see the global perspective influencing Australia's infection control strategy and vice versa? Let's talk about Kenya first. What you've done there.
The Kenya work wasn't so much around healthcare associated infections. So when I was finishing my training in the Netherlands, I had a role at the College of Surgeons to help run their annual conference. And when you're in that position, you get to pick the themes, the speakers. And when I was quite junior, just starting out in my research, I was at an international conference and I heard this chap speak in the audience, just made a comment or answered a question. But I thought, I just locked his name away in my mind. I thought, this is the most inspirational person I've ever heard. His name was Russell White, Professor Russell White. So he's a general and cardiothoracic surgeon. He's from the US, trained in Brown University, but for 30 years had been working in Kenya, built a hospital there, set up a surgical training program. But some of the cases he was doing was amazing. And at the same time, I'd ended up on some international committees with him. So I had a connection with him. And when I got this role at the college, I said, well, this is the first person I'm getting to come out and speak.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he never came out in person because it was COVID, but he did it virtually. But whilst I was engaging with him, he told me about the work he'd been doing and said, look, I'm just getting my first surgeons graduating, fully trained, but they need extra experience. So in Kenya, they get a lot of heart disease, especially young children with rheumatic heart disease. It's an infection that damages the heart valves. And when I took my whole family there during COVID.
See, I think of Kenya as magnificent middle and long distance runners.
Yeah, that's one single tribe in Kenya.
Is that right? Okay.
But when I'm doing the ward round there, you have 2-3 boys in a bed, 16-year-olds who can't even walk. Their heart's failing. And they're doing this life-saving surgery there. And what would cost $100,000 in the US, they've made it so sustainable, they've reduced it to $10,000 US, the same surgery. These surgeons are really good at fixing heart valves, but what they lack experiencing is the bypass surgery. So what we get a lot in the Western culture, you've heard of ischemic heart disease, someone has a heart attack, they have a bypass. They're starting to see, because of the, cultures changing, diets changing, Western influence, they're starting to see a lot more of that. So that they wanted their surgeons to be able to do that surgery. So they said, would you be able to set up a program where we could send them out, you could train them, and then, for 12 months. So whilst I'm not a cardiac surgeon, I do a bit of work in the chest with the esophagus, but I'm not cardiac. But I thought, surely it won't be that hard. Just call up a few friends, cardiac surgeons. Can we set this program up? It took me 2.5 years of meetings, negotiation, paperwork, getting approvals from the College of Surgeons, our medical board, getting the hospital, getting visas. So that whole process I was a bit naive at the start. I just said, yeah, sure. And it was 2.5 years, but we're about to take our third surgeon on. And they've each come out for 12 months. They've been back. They've done some amazing work. And in fact, Keith Dindy, who was the first surgeon that came out, I brought him out 2 months ago to give a lecture, and it's probably the best lecture you'll ever listen to. It was a full standing ovation, and the whole crowd are in tears.
You did invite me to that, yes.
Yeah, but it is on. We'll post a link. It is on. I'll put it on YouTube. Yeah, it's the best thing you'll ever listen to.
Yeah,
but that's when I was setting that program up. I took my family there. I just spent a week in the hospital. Went to about 3 or 4 sort of surgeries. I wanted to see what skills they had and what I could do to help, because they're already probably far more experienced and they're masters in their area. So I just needed to know how I could help. But it's not until you go there and see it firsthand, the size of the problem, what needs to be done, you realize we're so lucky here. We talk about all the problems in our healthcare system, but we're so well resourced. If you listen to this lecture, you've got people waiting 20 years for surgery. That's life-changing.
Where do you see the greatest? I mean, you are a bit of a disruptor of the status quo, at least.
Yeah.
where do you see the sort of greatest opportunities to actually disrupt healthcare over the next decade? And we'll just talk about here in Australia to start with.
Well, in Australia, I mean, the one thing I'm working on at the moment is just making the system more sustainable, because costs are rising and we're not going to be able to, treat the population, I guess, in 5, 10 years. Hospitals are closing, patients already in the public system, you're waiting months, years to be seen. Our waiting lists are blowing out, so something needs to change. So
there seemed to be a period, though, here in Australia where health wasn't as, you weren't looked after. I mean, the obesity epidemic really started to rise here in Australia quite a lot.
Yeah.
Seems to be that sort of divergence a bit now over probably the last 4 to 5 years where, it's a case of, well, we can live beyond 83 if we look after ourselves. But one of the things I noticed walking the city the other day, I've never been a smoker. Okay, so and the amount of people, not just vaping now, but the amount of people who are now smoking again. And I was having smoke blown in my face, and I haven't smelt that since visiting Asia. So
I still get it every day. If you walk into the main entrance at St. Vincent's, you've got about 3 smokers you got to get around.
Who have got their IV drips here and their cigarette and their gown half open down the back. Yeah.
That's a daily occurrence.
Do you know that's how my mum gave up smoking? She was a 50 a day smoker, my mum. She was told to start smoking when I was born because she had post-traumatic, it was a postnatal depression. Call it traumatic with me, I suppose. But so the doctor diagnosed her basically saying, take an aspirin and start smoking. That'll calm your nerves. And she ended up smoking.
Doctor's advice.
Yeah, doctor's advice. I mean, it was some 56 years ago, but it was doctor's advice. 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Marlboro.
Where's the evidence?
Exactly. But it was, but what was actually interesting, even though I was only about 2 months after I left home, so she just keeps blaming me for it being a smoker. But she actually had to go to hospital and she was having 2 bunions removed on both her feet. So she was in a wheelchair. Yeah. And she had a new packet of her cigarettes, and Dad was a non-smoker, and the whole household were all non-smokers except for Mum. And Dad had her in the wheelchair, and downstairs she wanted to puff on her cigarette. And she said, you know what? I think I'm going to give up smoking. And Dad, because my mum's a bit of a contrarian, so my dad said, well, don't light up and give up now. And she said, I'll give up when I finish this pack. And he goes, you see, you can't give up. And of course, my mum, to prove him wrong, threw away with that packet of cigarettes, and some 40 years later has not touched a cigarette.
Yeah. No, you hear stories like that, but it is an addiction.
But she was in the hospital, ready to go downstairs and be one of those people in the wheelchair lighting up a cigarette. Yeah. So it's and you do see that. And I sometimes think you've just actually, my children's mum, my children's grandmother, she's had open heart surgery twice now, would still come out of that surgery and light up a cigarette. And I just don't understand it personally.
Yeah, so there's certain surgeries that we refuse to do if patients.
Sorry, Sonia, about talking about you. You're not a bad teacher to my kids. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say there's certain operations that we would do that we would refuse to operate on people if they're still smoking.
Okay.
So that is a thing.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. That is good to know. Yep.
But look, one interesting point I learned this morning, though.
Yep.
Packet of cigarettes, $73, still doesn't deter people.
That's correct.
25 cigarettes.
Yeah, well, it is. Well, it doesn't necessarily deter people, but the amount of cigarettes being purchased has dropped significantly. But let's go back to what Evan was talking about, though. The amount of illegal cigarettes has gone through the roof. So is actually the government through their taxes actually has just, as he put it so succinctly, has actually created prohibition in this country. And the Al Capones of Glenroy. So my mum lives in Glenroy, and the amount of smoke shops that have been blown up there, except for one. There's just this one that hasn't been, which I did say to Mum, I just have this feeling they might be the kingpins. So they're the only one that hasn't been blown up, but all the other 5 have.
Just be careful. This is being recorded.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't mention. I just said Glenroy. I didn't mention them. So it's okay. So let's look on a personal note. You look back in 20 years from now, what do you hope your legacy has been in surgery, research, innovation? 20 years time, you're still a young man, but it's so. What are you looking at your legacy of all the work that you're doing? And I know you're not doing this for a legacy or to be well known or anything like that. You're quite a humble person, but what are you hoping to, as all this is done and is achieved?
I guess, like, you don't go into it,
No.
as you said, trying to achieve a legacy, but you just want to know that you've made a difference.
Yep.
Made some impact. And as a surgeon, you can do that on an individual basis, like you can treat the individual patient. But I think, the stuff that I've helped do in Kenya, or it's actually 6 sub-Saharan countries, helping to set that program up and train surgeons, by far that's going to have the greatest impact of anything I'll do as an individual, throughout my career. So that's probably my proudest achievement to date, and I'm sure it will be in 20 years' time. And if we can do something in the space of reducing infections, that would be huge as well. But it's it's a team effort. It needs to be. And
could you imagine the ecstasy of a family that will never know you, never know your name, but their mother, father, sibling, child hasn't died due to an infection, hasn't been one of those statistics of 7,500 people because of something that you guys that through Daylight have actually helped achieve.
Yeah, that'd be huge. And
they won't know who to fact. In fact, they won't even know that it was
sort of impact that if it goes well, you'll never know.
100% correct. So it's
you're like SAS, the grey man. That's what you don't want to stand out.
No, that's exactly right. So it's I actually I was telling you that the charity, the Veterans Charity Carry On, that I sat on their board for 5 years, and
that's with Legacy.
No, this is with Carry On. So this is providing 40,000 nights accommodation to homeless veterans.
Yep.
And the greatest thing that charity could ever do would be to never be required. In other words, the veterans aren't homeless. The veterans aren't going through their 3rd divorce. The veterans aren't dependent on cigarettes, out gambling, through their PTSD. That would be the greatest thing that could ever happen for that charity. Is that's just not required.
Yeah, and fingers crossed they get there. But the veterans that they have, I've had to treat a lot of them over the years, and there's a lot of significant issues there, PTSD, and that has huge implications.
The issue starts with the brain and then affects the entire body through addictions and all the rest of it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And bad choices because of the PTSD.
And I come from a military family, and I spent 5 years in the Army Reserves. But you sort of, it opens your eyes to some degree.
Yep. So let's have a couple of rapid fire questions. I know the answer to some of these, but I'm going to get you to answer for our guests to get to know the associate professor just that little bit better, if that's okay. Who's your AFL football team and why?
Kangaroos.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because of their run in the 90s.
But Wayne Carey still doesn't like you.
No, he wouldn't know me. But my dad's, when I was growing up, early teenage years, my dad's business partner was chairman of selectors at the club. So you're probably a bit brainwashed. I remember Dennis Pagan would drive us to the footy on a Friday night. That was when North used to play on a Friday night at the G. It was a real buzz. You got to go down to the rooms before the game and take it all in. So yeah, that I was. And when I was in year 10, you do work experience. I did it with Harry Unglich, who was the North Melbourne Footy Club doctor at the time. Okay. I think he ended up doctor for the AFL. I'm sure he's probably retired now. But I spent the week with him. He took me to training and the games and got to treat the players who came to the room. And even he joined forces with the Carlton Footy Club doctor, Phil Pearlstein.
Yeah.
So you had North and Carlton players coming in, and it was just when you're a kid and you're seeing all these superstars come in like the Stephen Silvanis, it's like, oh wow. But
I do remember probably the greatest home and away game, or one of two of the greatest home and away games I've ever attended and seen live was Essendon North Melbourne. Don't know what year it was in the 90s, where Essendon were like 10 goals behind at halftime and ended up winning, and there was like 45 goals scored for the entire game. It was, you had, it was a battle of the forward lines, and it was just one of the most sensational. As an Essendon supporter, it was one of the most sensational games I've ever seen.
I'm sure I was probably there and feeling devastated.
Another one was Essendon Geelong. A good friend of mine, Paul Salmon, says, can't believe it, I kicked 10 goals in the game and no one remembers because there was another guy up the other end called Gary Ablett who kicked 14. But the Bombers came from behind and still won. Fantastic game.
Yeah. And then growing up, my mum, who you met today, she was a practice manager, so she would run GP clinics and specialist rooms.
There from Xavier.
Yeah, so that was actually a birthing centre. So there's a well-known obstetrician, Bruce Sutherland, who worked there, and he was probably, even before I got into medicine, he was my first mentor. Like, I wanted to, be like Bruce. He was my role model. Such a lovely gentleman. And
is that why you ended up marrying a midwife?
Probably, yeah. Well, he married a midwife, so I married a midwife.
Yeah.
June Sutherland. Yeah, they had the birth centre there, and they were the first ones to do the underwater births and everything.
Okay.
But there was a chiropractor working there, Scotty McGuinness. He was number 20 for Hawthorn. His son plays now. But he won some
Played the Bulldogs as well, didn't he?
No, always Hawthorn. His father played, and then Scotty played. But
I'm thinking of Tony McGuinness.
Yeah, he was at Adelaide Crows.
Yeah, I think he was Bulldogs as well.
No, but Scotty, Hawthorn won some grand finals in the 80s. But he was full back on.
I know, being an Essendon.
He was full back on Gary Ablett, I remember. And Gary would kick 10+ goals on him. And
so he had a quiet day.
I think they won because he limited him to 10 goals.
Yeah, that's right. So Gary had a quiet day, that one. Okay, let's ask some other questions. What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Wake up. Now I have a cup of tea. I never used to be a tea drinker, but my wife has always been a tea drinker, and it took her probably 20 years for me to start drinking tea. But now I have a tea.
Okay, I'll ignore the next question then. So it's because we now know what you have. So it's so what's one book that you've read that you think everyone should read? Be on any subject or topic, fiction, non-fiction.
Any subject. Well, I was a military man, and I was in the reserves, but military family. And there was this book called Bravo 20. It's about the British SAS.
Yeah,
I was fascinated with the SAS. And
my cousin was a Red Beret
and
a paratrooper.
Wow. And anyway, my dad got posted to the UK. We had family friends, and he was like first on the Falklands War, and he ended up in charge of selection for the SAS. And he took me to Hereford, which is their army base. And, you see the clock tower where all the names get listed for the people who don't come back. But listening to him, some of the work that they did was like amazing. But he gave me a copy of this book, and Bravo 20, and it talks about all the training they went through, and just trying to perform at that elite level, and all the psychology behind it. But it was certainly a captivating read.
Between the SAS and the Navy SEALs, you have to be a completely different breed of human to be able to just get through training, and never mind actually work at that elite level. It's unbelievable.
But he said, I think the guy's name's Andy McNabb, but I think Raz called him Mitch, so his name must be Andy Mitchell. But
okay,
it's that's a book that stands out over the years. And then the other one I got was you're going to Houston, NASA. When I was there last year, I got to go to NASA headquarters in Washington and meet the chief medical officer of NASA. But I got a book there, and it was An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. So that's probably worth reading too.
Yeah.
It's just I like seeing what I can learn from other fields, other elite people, and what lessons you can learn.
So, audio book or paperback?
Paper.
Yeah, same with me.
I rarely. My wife's a huge reader. I rarely get time. At the moment, I'm reading my PhD student's thesis at the moment, so I feel guilty if I read anything else. And I'm probably 2 months overdue. So if he's watching this, he'll be saying, "Keep reading."
Good to know. Good to know. What's your guilty pleasure after a long work week? Besides the anchovies on toast.
If I had the time to do anything, I would just go hit a bucket of golf balls on a range. Just practice fairway, just anything. I like any ball sport, really. Yeah, just takes my mind. It's my zen place. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So, early mornings or late nights?
Both. I'd get probably more done in a late night than an early morning, but just the nature of the work, you're up early. But I tend to work late too. And I do a lot of work, like talking to people in the US, for instance. Just means a lot of late night meetings.
Okay, so I've got a couple of last questions here. If you give your 21-year-old self one sentence of advice, what would it be?
Don't stress, just go with the flow, I guess. Initially I had a clear plan of what I wanted to do, and early on I got a lot of rejection letters, applying for surgery 3-4 times, missing out. In the end, things happen. and probably just don't say no. You know, I do a lot of roles, but it's probably just because I don't say no. If you say yes, it opens up other opportunities that lead to other things.
Discussion the other morning.
Yeah. So that's weird. Just, you know, grasp all the opportunities you get, really.
Yeah, no, that's a great bit of advice. Most valuable thing you've learned from a mistake?
It would probably be technical in surgery. You know, I don't want to go into details, but you know, if you're doing complex surgery, every little thing you do can have like a downstream implication on the patient. And the surgery we do, if there's a bad outcome, can lead to significant infection, morbidity, mortality. You know, certainly patients do die, and you know that has ramifications. But even if it's not your fault, you just you end up stewing on things for weeks. Like you might not sleep for a couple of weeks. So it's it's sometimes they're the toughest situations. Like you learn a lot from the cases that go wrong. You know, so without going to specifics, it relate to that.
I should have asked your mum this question this morning, but 3 words people would use to describe you. I will confirm this with Anne at a later date.
Really chaotic, last minute, and late. I don't know.
We might ask Laura, your PA.
Yeah, definitely late. Slow on his dictations. No, but one thing I do is from the clinical side, I give 150% to all my patients. I want to treat a patient how I want my family member treated.
Jason actually said that about you.
Oh, that's nice.
So before we even met, Jason kept talking about you, and I was having lunch with him, and I could actually, it was great to see that he could eat. So it was, he spoke, and he said, "Oh, you have to meet him," and I said, "Well, let's set it up."
Well,
so,
that's
and thus you're here.
Yeah, I mean, Jason's a great guy. Yeah, OAM getting his King's.
Whilst he was whilst he was lying in the bed and you were looking after him.
Yeah, and he was that humble, he didn't even tell me, but he ended up probably 4 weeks in the hospital, you know, without once again going into specifics, but it related to that healthcare associated infection. He had multiple procedures to help treat that. But I guess when patients are in hospital so long, you end up forming quite a bond with him. You see him a couple of times a day, and you could just go in, see they're all right.
And he's a lovable guy.
Yeah,
and he loves a chat. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, on the evening ward round for half an hour at night, and you know, that's probably half the reason you end up 10 o'clock at home. You know? but that's you don't. I guess you don't learn about people and you should talk to them, and you try and talk to them beyond just their clinical problem. You know, get to know them. But we had a lot of correlation with the footy. All my idols from that '90s North team, he sort of
drink at his pub.
Yeah, he knew them all.
Exactly right. So it's no, you did know them all. Last question, I promise. You got to finish your sentence. Success is?
Probably just happiness, I reckon.
Great answer. Great one-word answer. Well, one of the best I've heard. Associate Professor Andrew Reid, thank you. Jeez, where did I get Andrew from? Sorry, Matthew. Where did I get Andrew from? Matthew Reid.
He's a good bloke too, Andrew. You get him on next week.
He actually is a client of mine, so you're correct. He's actually a great bloke, as all the clients are, Matthew. Thank you so much for coming in today.
No, it's a pleasure.
And it was great to be at the Hope Foundation. So you're doing great work there too.
Come along to the next gig.
I know
garden party, Atlanta.
I actually won the raffle this morning.
Oh, did you?
That was actually my ticket to Sarah when collected.
Oh, nice. So you will be there.
Yeah, so no, I'll be there.
Nice one. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's funny. She said, "Oh, you just giving me these tickets?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm donating them to you unless I win, of course." I think it's best raffle.
I'll give you a freebie anyway.
No. It's for a good cause.
But we will put on the links to all these organisations.
Yeah, no, it's definitely for a good cause. So I'm more than happy to pay.
Right. And Dindy's lecture. Have a look at that.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I've got 43 followers online now, so I'll know if any of your viewers watch it.
Yeah, so we shall watch it today. Matthew, thank you so much for your morning and also for what you did this morning and also coming in today.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Kofkin Bond podcast is a product from Kofkin Bond & Company, which we are an authorized representative of Count Financial. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, finance, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of the Kofkin Bond podcast are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decision, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from the podcast. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the Kofkin Bond website, or you can find resources on the ASIC website and find a registered financial professional near you. In the spirit of reconciliation, Kofkin Bond & Co. and the hosts of the Kofkin Bond podcast acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.